In the dead of winter, when the Ural Mountains are buried under feet of snow, and the howling winds seem to carry the voices of the dead, a group of 9 experienced hikers embarked on an expedition that would become one of the most mysterious and terrifying tragedies in history. Yuri, the leader of the group, was a seasoned mountaineer. He had navigated these mountains many times before, but this time, something felt different. The air was thicker, the silence more oppressive. The locals in the nearby village had warned them of the Mountain of the Dead, where strange occurrences were said to happen. But Yuri and his group dismissed the tales as superstition. On the first night, as they set up camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, everything seemed normal. They laughed around the campfire, telling stories to pass the time, oblivious to the dark presence that was already watching them. As the fire died down and they retreated to their tent, the wind picked up, its howl like a distant scream. The first sign that something was wrong came on the second day. Nikolai, the youngest in the group, woke up with a deep sense of unease. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like they were being watched. The others shrugged it off as paranoia, but the feeling lingered. That evening, as they prepared to sleep, they heard it, a low, rumbling noise like the growl of a beast. The sound echoed through the mountains, sending a chill down their spines. Yuri reassured them that it was just the wind, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his fear. The next day, the weather turned. A storm rolled in, with heavy snow and gale-force winds. They were forced to set up camp early, unable to continue in the blinding whiteout. As they huddled together in their tent, the growling noise returned, louder this time, closer. Nikolai couldn't take it anymore. He scrambled to his feet and unzipped the tent, peering into the storm. The others tried to stop him, but he was already outside, his figure swallowed by the snow. They waited, their hearts pounding, but he didn't return. Minutes felt like hours, and just as they were about to go after him, they heard his screams, horrible, blood-curdling screams that echoed through the mountains. Then silence. Terrified, they zipped the tent shut and waited, their breaths shallow, listening for any sign of Nikolai. The night was long and sleepless, filled with the ominous sounds of the storm and the occasional thud against the tent, like something heavy being dragged across the snow. When dawn finally broke, they emerged cautiously, only to find the camp in disarray. Their supplies were scattered, the snow stained with blood, and Nikolai, he was nowhere to be found. All that remained were deep, claw-like marks in the snow, leading away from the camp and into the forest. Panic set in. Yuri tried to keep the group together, insisting they stick to the plan and head for the next checkpoint, but fear had taken hold. They moved quickly, the terror driving them forward, but the mountain seemed to twist and turn, leading them in circles. The third night, they didn't even bother setting up camp. Exhausted and terrified, they decided to take shifts, keeping watch for whatever was stalking them. But sleep deprivation took its toll, and soon, they were all drifting in and out of consciousness. It was during one of these moments that Igor, another member of the group, noticed something outside the tent. At first, it was just a shadow barely visible through the fabric. But as he stared, the shadow grew clearer, a tall, dark figure, with glowing eyes and long, clawed fingers. Igor screamed, waking the others, but when they looked, the figure was gone. They were all on edge, fear driving them to the brink of madness. They couldn't stay here any longer. They had to leave, to get off this cursed mountain. In their desperation, they made the decision to abandon the tent and head for the treeline, hoping to find shelter, or at least a place to hide. But as they ran through the snow, something chased them, something they couldn't see, but could feel. The forest offered no safety. The growling was louder now, echoing through the trees. Yuri, leading the way, was the first to fall. He tripped over something buried in the snow, a body. It was Nikolai, his face frozen in a mask of terror, his chest torn open as if by some great beast. Panic erupted. The group scattered, running in different directions. Zina, one of the women in the group, tried to help Yuri, but he pushed her away, screaming at her to run. She did, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she plowed through the snow, the growling and screams of her friends behind her. She didn't know how long she ran before she stumbled into a clearing. There in the center was an old, abandoned cabin. The windows were dark, the door hanging off its hinges, but it was shelter. Without thinking, she rushed inside, slamming the door behind her. The cabin was dark, filled with the stench of decay. She could barely see, her flashlight flickering weakly as she scanned the room. Then she saw them, more bodies frozen in the snow, piled in the corner. These were not her friends, but others, lost hikers from years past. Before she could react, she heard it, a low, raspy breathing right behind her. She turned slowly, the flashlight shaking in her hand. The figure from the tent stood before her, its eyes glowing in the darkness, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, its voice like the wind, cold and empty. Zena screamed, backing away, but there was nowhere to go. The creature moved closer, its long fingers reaching for her. She stumbled over the bodies, falling to the ground as the creature loomed over her. Her last thoughts were of her friends, scattered across the mountain, their fates sealed by the same entity that had claimed the lives of so many before them. As the creature's claws closed around her, Zena's screams echoed through the night, carried away by the wind. When rescuers finally arrived days later, they found the camp abandoned, the bodies scattered across the mountain. The official report listed hypothermia and an unknown compelling force as the cause of death. But the true horror of what happened on Dyatlov Pass remains buried in the snow, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting hikers to uncover it.